The conference finals are officially set. We are down to the final four in both the NBA and the NHL. The NHL Stanley Cup playoffs have set records now as the most watched Stanley Cup playoffs ever. And Xander Schauffele finally, and I mean finally, wins his first ever major at the PGA Championships. I'm your host, Matthew Reardon, and this is Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights. What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk Beyond the Lights, where I'm your host, Matthew Reardon, and today with me is good old trusty sidekick here, Ed Smith.
Welcome, y'all.
It is just me and Ed today. David will be back here shortly, but we appreciate you guys tuning in. And if you watch the intro here, we are down to our final four teams in both the NBA and NHL, and I'm eager to talk about it just because, well, this is pretty much the end of the season for these teams, and this is where you have to play on your A game. If you do not play on your A game, you will be going home early. You'll be set packing, and when you have to be on your A game, uh, we need to talk about the number one team in basketball right now, and that's the Boston Celtics. If you want to beat the Boston Celtics, you are going to have to be on your A game. And, well, they will be facing off against the Indiana Pacers. And as we speak right now, they are facing off against each other, and it is a very close game. But Boston, there have been times where we saw them look a little bit human, like against the Heat, but that was kind of an anomaly. Where now, uh, they're facing off against the Pacers, which are the best offensive team right now in basketball. But Boston still the standard to you, Ed?
They've created a new standard for regular season, but they haven't really created a standard for playoff. It is it almost appears that they seem bored at times just with how good they've been, but that's not going to cut it at this final four stage of the playoffs. So they've got to be able to step it up, especially with the team that has been really firing offensively like nothing we've seen in quite some time. How Indiana got into the playoffs, got into the conference final was just I they were throwing stuff from half court blindfolded and it was going in. It was ridiculous. But as far as Boston is concerned, they have just been consistently so much better than everybody else that that standard that they had during the regular season, if Cleveland didn't scare it out of them, let's hope Indiana scares it into them during this round.
Well, yeah, Indiana, they're like a fireball out there where their motto is, well, a better defense is actually better offense. So, because that is
Mm-hmm.
where they star, that's where they shine bright, is on the offensive side of the ball. Boston is a pretty well-rounded team, both offensively and defensively, but we know their offense is surrounded by Jason Tatum. When they went to the finals
Mm-hmm.
just a couple years ago, where they did lose to Golden State, it was the Jason Tatum show, and it continues to be the Jason Tatum show until you get one game where Jaylen Brown decides, to show his true all-star form. But it's always going to be Jason Tatum for this team, but they still are a very well-rounded team here. I mean, when you look at the stats, you see that Jason Tatum is leading their team with 24.3 points a game, which although may not look flashy, and I said that, yes, it's a Jason Tatum show, he still is their leader, from top to bottom. But they do have a stacked offense, though, with Derek White. I mean, I think he's kind of been almost their unsung hero in the playoffs, averaging 18.2 points per game. He's very streaky also, but he's fun to watch. He's a name that you may not know of, but because we're always talking about Jason Tatum or the Jaylen Browns or even Porzingis,
Mm-hmm.
which we'll talk about here in a second, But I feel like they kind of are built though for a decent run, especially with the addition of Drew Holiday. We've seen what Drew Holiday's done in his career, but having him there, I just feel like they're built for a decent run this year. And they are the number one team in basketball until that changes. So, I mean, you have any more to add to that, Ed?
I feel like Boston is a team that if they get up on you, they can close you out quite easily. And a big part of that is free throws. When you look at the top five guys for the Celtics right now, the worst free throw shooter is Jaylen Brown. Everybody else is over 80%. That is going to close you out games, and you don't let a team like Indiana foul you into the getting some surprise miracle ending. No, you shut them out, and they've got nothing to go lean on because they don't have the defense. They, they've got all the offense in the world, but the rebounding, the defense, uh, the the free throw shooting, it all leans Celtics way. You know, Indiana, their best defense is trying to outscore you, and if Celtics can get ahead of them and close out these games, this isn't going to last very long.
Yeah, and I feel the same. I mean, throughout the season, they did play 5 times, and Boston leads the series 3-2, which is extremely close. Unlike what we're almost insinuating here. Boston though is without Kristaps Porzingis, which I heard they may get him back by Game 4, but they may not even need him. That's just how good this Celtics team is. But I don't want to sound contradicting here because I do want to talk about the Indiana Pacers team. We did talk about their offense, but I really like this team. They are a very young team, similar to what OKC is, and uh, you can't really exactly pinpoint who their star is. Although a lot of people say Halliburton, or they did pick up Siakam during the trade deadline, also. But this team, where they're fun to watch, is that you could see their youth, but they all want to kind of share the ball at the same time. When I watch Halliburton play, he is very selfless out there, and he wants to share the ball as much as possible, sometimes to a fault, because you're passing up open shots just to give someone else another shot. But my favorite player to watch on their team is TJ McConnell. That guy he's an energizer bunny. When he's out there, it seems like the spark, the chemistry is just a little bit higher. Very similar to how I explained Derek White with Boston. TJ McConnell, he's very fun to watch out there offensively and defensively. He's going to give you the best that he can out there. And that's what I like watching with players, especially in the playoffs, because you never know who's going to show up. And he's one of those guys that does his best to show up every night. So lays it all out there on the court.
And one of the things I find really fun to watch with Indiana is the fact that they are distributing to each other. It isn't distribute to one guy and clear the floor, ISO basketball. This is truly get it to the guy that's open, no matter who you are or where they are. Get it to the guy that's open, and they'll make something happen for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And there, I saw this very similar the other night, and we're going to talk about it as well with in the Minnesota game with actually Anthony Edwards. I lost track on how many times he was giving up open shots because he wanted to share the ball. It's like, dude, just start taking the shots. But we'll talk about that. But I'm one of those that I will admit when I'm wrong. And just not too long ago, we did our rankings on here of the final 8 teams on where we had them. And two of them, my worst teams, I'll say 6 and 7, are two of the teams that made it to the conference championships. And that is Indiana. And that is, we're going to talk about them right now, the Dallas Mavericks. The Dallas Mavericks kind of they shocked me here, and I think what was even more shocking to me was the fact that this is the second time in 3 years that Dallas has made the conference championships. I was blown by that when I saw that stat. I was like, why did I not know that? I guess I just wasn't paying too much attention. I mean, probably because I pay attention to football and other sports ahead of basketball. I'll be honest, but I was shocked when I saw that, and that's where I want to admit that I was wrong because I did not. anticipate Dallas to be there. I did not anticipate Indiana to be there, but here we are. They both are there, and more power to them. That's awesome that they faced the adversity. I know I wasn't the only critic, and here they are in the conference finals, where, like I said, anything can happen. But they will be facing off the very, very hungry Timberwolves, right, Ed? The Wolves.
The Wolves, yes, the Timberwolves. You know, and Minnesota is one of those teams that's really frightening to a lot of people simply because they are a team that we don't see a lot in, or at least I haven't seen a lot in the NBA compared to what I grew up watching. And that is defense turns to offense. And that is the calling card of what I've seen out of this Minnesota team because they were down 20 points in that game 7 with Denver. And what did they do? They didn't panic. They went back to what got them there, the defense. The defense on the floor turned immediately to offense. And you saw Ant-Man, he had, 7 points midway through the third quarter and leads in a comeback in which they win by 10. That is a 30-point swing within 20 minutes of game time. And that is a tremendous accomplishment for them. So they are definitely scary for the Mavericks. You got Rudy Gobert in the center doing big man things. For so many years, we've seen all these big men want to play with not with their back to the basket or do those big man things. They want to be out in the perimeter with everybody else. Rudy Gobert's a little bit of a throwback in my mind with that involvement where he is because you see him leading the team in rebounding, both offensive and defensively. He's getting close to the basket, so his field goal percentage is high. He's doing that dirty work. Those things are important for a team like this that relies on its defense. And yet, on the other side, you see the Mavericks. They've gotten here by being somewhat balanced in the fact that they are they are scoring 106 points a game in these playoffs, but they're giving up 103. So it's a razor thin margin, and I'm interested to see if they can overcome that point differential, maybe spread it out a little bit to win a few of those games. Maybe get some home court advantage because that really helped them in the last series.
Yeah, and with Minnesota, you hit the nail right on it with Rudy Gobert. I mean, he is the defensive player of the year, and he has had that trend of being the defensive player there for some time now. He's done it on Salt Lake. He's done it in Minnesota now. And when he had originally got traded there, I was like, how are they going to do things with Karl Anthony Towns and him? Well, I'll tell you how they're going to do it. Exactly how they're doing it right now. Because Karl Anthony Towns, don't forget, that guy knows how to shoot the three ball. He is also a winner of the 3-point competition. So just because he's a big man does not mean that he cannot shoot it. So I think it plays out perfectly because he can stretch to the perimeter. And then you could have someone like Rudy Gobert snatching those rebounds, or even on the defensive side, snatching those blocks, because that's where he's at his best game. So you're giving that guy the opportunity to play his very best game. And that's already perfect. But then when you have someone like Anthony Edwards, and I want to talk about Anthony Edwards, guys, he may not be showing you these Jalen Brunson type games, game in and game out, but he is averaging 28.9 points per game. So he is scoring the ball. But I sit there and I watch him play. And Ed, you could correct me, you could agree with me, and I'm interested to hear what you have to say. But do you see a young Michael? When you just how he wears his uniform, kind of how he carries himself, he may not have the talent just yet, but I see someone who can get there.
See, you invoke the name,
I didn't say the
and
last name. It could be Michael Porter Jr.
oh, sure, sure. I'm sure we're all thinking Michael Porter Jr.
Exactly.
Um, so that comparison has been floating around, and to me, it's one of those comparisons that really comes up anytime that somebody has an outstanding eyeball test in the playoffs. We start wanting to try and make that comparison. You know, who's going to be the next guy? Who's going to be the next Kobe? Who's going to be the next Carmelo? Who's going to be the next uh, Michael? Won't say the last name. Um, and this guy, he reminds me of Michael, maybe at this, but before he beat the Cavaliers on the most replayed shot ever in basketball history. Uh, because at that time, Michael was known as an extremely talented player, but could not win when it counted. He was very flashy. He was just very dynamic, and everybody loved him for how great of an individual ball player he was. Where he turned the switch was when Phil Jackson got him to buy into the team ball aspect of it, and that's when things really got going for him. Anthony Edwards, I believe, is right on the cusp of getting into that echelon. We've just got to see the result before we can say anything like that, because he's going to be the first Anthony Edwards no matter what happens here. That's clear as day. But is he the next big thing for the NBA? We're yet to see. We're still going through this playoffs and see where they wind up before we start crowning anybody at this point.
Well, and I want to add a disclaimer on there because I'm not sitting here saying that I think Anthony Edwards is going to be, the greatest of all time, similar to Michael, and I will say his last name now, Jordan. But I see some similarities in his game. I'm also one of those that I don't like. I mean, Michael Jordan was, eras ago where I don't like jumping those eras as much. It's just how I see how he carries himself, the swagger, almost similar to, and this is more my comparison is a Michael at North Carolina, because he is still establishing himself, but he's got the talent. You can see that he's got that talent, but it's going to take just a little bit of fine tuning, similar to exactly how you said with Phil Jackson, buying into that to where it just clicked, light bulb. And Anthony Edwards, I'm not saying that he's going to be the greatest, but I do see a lot of similar traits, that it is fun to watch. It really is. You watch how he wears his uniform, similar body shape. I mean, the guy could jump throughout the arena. I mean, this guy has endless gravity, similar to Michael Jordan, and I, I would love to see someone like this kind of almost replicate those features, and I see a lot of that with Anthony Edwards. So that's kind of my piece there. But I want to jump over to Dallas. Dallas with Luka Doncic, Kyrie Irving, and you're like, wow, how does that work? I mean, you just got two kind of point guards right there, and this isn't the same. All right, I want to say the same, but this isn't your Luka Doncic that we were seeing maybe before Kyrie was there. This is kind of a more even, well balanced type of Luka Doncic that we're seeing. But Kyrie Irving's actually taken the foot off the gas pedal, I've noticed, in this second round of the playoffs. The first round, and I said it on here, who's going to be their guy? And it was confusing because that was a question for a while, and they didn't establish it. Well, I think they have. Luka's their guy. Kyrie, though, is a great role player right now. But when they need Kyrie to hit a shot, Kyrie's going to hit that shot. And he proved that this last game when he hit some very clutch three-pointers for them. And then PJ Washington, ultimately, who is their biggest spark out of this, I think, in the second round with his clutch free throws at the end. So I think they finally have found their identity with having Luka as their guy, but Kyrie Irving, to me, he's been one of my favorite basketball players. The way that his dribbles, his handles, and even his jump shooting ability. We saw his clutch shot against the Golden State Warriors in the finals several years ago. So Kyrie's got that dog in him, but it will run through Luka. So it's Going to be an interesting matchup because it is conference finals. This is the Western Conference Finals here, but the Timberwolves did play them 5 times this year, and they won 4 times out of 5. So Timberwolves, they know what they look like, but so does Dallas. They know how Minnesota looks like. So it's going to be fun to watch.
The one point I'll make with Luka and Kyrie is they account for close to 75% of the assists per game that they have.
Mhm.
And that's going to be a tough run if Luka is going to be bottled up. How well are the handles for Kyrie going to be in distributing with Luka being taken out of the picture?
Mhm.
And that's the one question mark that I'll throw out there for the Mavericks at this point. I don't see a lot of closeout free throw shooting, as I alluded to for Boston. Uh, I see them kind of needing each of the players to do one thing better than the other person around them does it for it all to work in unison. So everybody's got their role. Who's going to be able to step out of that role and play above that? That's going to be something that I'm looking forward to in this series.
Yeah, and believe it or not, going into this series, there are 2 players that actually have higher blocks averages than Rudy Gobert going into this. I mean, Derek Jones Jr. and Daniel Gafford. So you don't really see that too often, but very similar where they're averaging 1.4. He's averaging 1.1 or so. So, but he'll bring it. But I want to really quick talk about in the playoffs right now. Offensively and defensively, as we've already pretty much insinuated, the Indiana Pacers are leading the entire offensive category in the playoffs as they average 114.2 points a game, which is just crazy to me. And last on that list is the Dallas Mavericks at 106.5. So you have the first best offense, you have the last best offense, but it shows you though that you could still make it happen because the Indiana Pacers also have the worst defense at 110.8 points allowed a game. So you're looking at a 4 point difference there. So it, however you want to read it, that's fine. But the Pacers are there because they belong there.
Mhm.
But if you were just to look at the best offense and that worst defense, it being them, you could really read a lot into it. Uh, the Timberwolves have out of the four teams have the second best offense at 108.4 points a game. So they're 6 points less. So there is a gap there because Boston Celtics at 108.1, and then I already talked about Dallas with total offense, and then best defense you have the Celtics with only giving up 96.7 points a game. So as Ed talked about earlier, that's kind of their staple. So you're going to have the best of their defense versus the best of the Pacers offense, and we're seeing 2 powerhouses collide as we speak.
So let me ask you this, Matthew. When you're looking at the point differential going into this series, and you see Boston with a 12 point differential, you see Minnesota with a almost 9 point differential, but then you go and see their opponents both be 3 4 points different. How much do you think that plays into what we're going to see as a finality of these two series?
I think for Minnesota, it speaks more because you're talking about a Minnesota team that beat, I think, the most complete team in my mind in the defending champs, the Denver Nuggets. And the reason their point differential is that high is because they had some blowout wins on them that is crazy to even think against a Denver team like that. So I think for the Timberwolves, that speaks more to them playing a team like the Mavericks, who have one of the worst offenses and not one of the best defenses out there. Whereas the Celtics, I think it's going to be different because the Pacers have shown every single game that they know how to score. So it could just get to the point to where Boston, it's going to turn into a shootout to where you're just going to have to.
And that's exactly what Indiana wants.
Yeah.
They don't want to. They want to get back on offense. They don't care about defense.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. So who's going to tire themselves out, first? Because
It, exactly. I mean, you already saw how Tom Thibodeau's team just ran out of gas in that series, trying to keep up with them because they are moving so quickly up and down the floor, trying to get as many shots as possible off. Uh, and that would be the concern I have for Boston is can you keep up the energy level of how much Indiana is going to throw at you?
yeah, they're constantly firing on all cylinders, and you're really going to struggle having to keep up with that. Say it goes all 7 games, you're going to be exhausted. So it's a great point. That's a point that should really be looked at more. But this isn't the only conference finals that are set. The NHL conference finals are set as well. And coming out of the East, we have the Florida Panthers versus the New York Rangers. Florida end up being Boston, and pretty much I'd almost say a lopsided series. And then the Rangers were dominating, but they let the Hurricanes back into the series. But the Hurricanes are a great team, so uh, I want to put that out there. But the Rangers ended up winning that series, and this is going to be my favorite series probably of the rest of of the Stanley Cup final playoffs here. It was almost like they were on a collision course to meet, and over throughout the season, Florida has controlled the Rangers. They are 2-0-1. Their one loss coming as an overtime loss, so that's the only win the Rangers have. But man, this series just to me as a hockey fan is really what you want to see. It's also a great goalie matchup with Shesterkin and Bobrovsky in the net. So this series is filled with guys that know how to score. Honestly, with Matthew Czech with the Panthers, as well as even Zibanejad or Chris Kreider with the Rangers, or even Vincent Trocheck, the Rangers have continuously scored throughout the playoffs. Also, and keep in mind the Rangers are the President's Trophy winner, where we've talked before about the curse and everything. But the Rangers, besides almost giving up that big lead against the Hurricanes, they look like they are poised for a Stanley Cup final run here. So, Ed, what have you seen kind of going into this series from the previous series? Both these teams are built for this, right?
They're built for this. Uh, the two goalies are built for this because there's going to be pucks flying everywhere. And both of these teams, they want to get the ball into the zone. They want to get it deep into the crease and just just constantly pound the goalies until they get the puck in the net. So that's what I've seen mostly. And when you look at the power play uh, for the Rangers, it has just been lethal. You're, I mean, what is this? 6, 8, 10? I mean, just constantly. Uh, if they've got the man advantage, they're going to get an advantage, and that's the way that they've really, taking control of the series up to this point. So they're really going to have to keep that portion up, and Florida's just got to keep pace. But if anybody can keep pace with that kind of offensive firepower, Florida has shown so far in these playoffs that they're up to the challenge.
Yeah, I mean Barkov, their captain, he's probably the hardest player out there. When I say hardest player, this is a guy who's physical. It's a guy who knows how to score. He does everything for the Panthers, and that's what I like so much about this series because the Rangers are also a very physical team. Probably saw rookie sensation. Rempe, and that these guys too tall for hockey. A lot of people will tell you that, but it's really fun to watch. But to hone in more on the power play success the Rangers have had, they have always been a very well-rounded power play team. But was Zibanejad is one of their best power play scorers, but Trocheck has really actually surprised a lot of people this postseason with his success there. But Zibanejad, Panarin, and Chris Kreider, they are built with so much success on that side that that's just it's almost like you have them in a power play situation, they're probably gonna score. And they did this the entire playoffs, the entire second round too. So the Rangers, that's where their success comes, but also their success is with Igor Shesterkin, who is just kind of really showing that reminisce of just 2 years ago, the amazing stretch run that he had, or being the top goalie out there. He's showing you again that that's where he belongs to be. So the Rangers, that's why I chose them. Has nothing to do with them being the President Trophy winners. I just felt that they were the most built for this. But the Panthers, they will not surprise me if they do end up pulling this off. Also, I think this one is anybody's series.
Yeah, and one thing that I've want to point out is the average time on ice for the most important players has been somewhat kept under control for both of these teams. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk is under 20 minutes on the ice per game, and keeping him fresh is so important if they're going to have any shot against the Rangers.
Oh,
That's a huge thing for them. The Rangers, they've kept everything somewhat even across the board, which means you're not overexerting your third and fourth line, getting out there and creating those open lanes for the Panthers to take advantage of. That's that's been a very good job uh, across the board for the Rangers, keeping everything somewhat even, but a great job by the Panthers to keep your big guns fresh and ready to roll at any point by not overexerting them when it's not necessary.
yeah, this is hockey. It's so physical. Their legs are like rubber already at this point in the season. We've talked about just how long their season is and how long it stretches. But make no mistake, these guys could be the hockey version of a Nolan Ryan if it came down to it. Nolan Ryan would throw 200 pitches a game if he could, because that's how much he loves the game and that's how much he wanted to win for his team. So these guys are the same way. They're animals out there, but the fresher the legs, the better at this point. So you do have to play that safe.
Definitely.
And this next series with the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars, Stars pulled off a great series win against the Avalanche to advance here. Where the Oilers, uh, I did not have the Oilers beating the Vancouver Canucks, and I don't think the Vancouver Canucks had that either. And uh, this Oilers team, where they've shocked me the most is in this second round against the Canucks. Connor McDavid, only one goal. But what's more amazing about that is that he still has 21 points because they're all in assists. And that's where I'm so fascinated about it, because I'm sure everyone's heard the stat before where if you took all of Wayne Gretzky's goals away and just counted his assists, he would still be the all-time points leader in the NHL. Well, Connor McDavid's following that trend right now, as we saw what he did in the regular season with 100 assists. Now you see what he's doing with the assist in the postseason. This isn't your typical scoring Connor McDavid. This is your pass-friendly Connor McDavid, which we're not really, like I said, used to seeing. And so that's why it really surprised me is that you're not seeing on the headlines Connor McDavid scoring, because he's not. But he is still getting points because of his assist. And that needs to be talked about more, in my opinion, because here are the Oilers now in the Western Conference Finals, which a lot of people had them counted out. And Connor McDavid is not their top scorer, not by far. He's their least goal scorer in on their team.
Yeah, and the 1-2 punch with him and Draisaitl has just been just dynamic, and it really harkens back to the days of the old Edmonton Oilers dynasty with Gretzky and Lemieux. You know, somebody I had seen a comparison side by side, and there's not much difference between uh, back then and now. Of course, the game has changed and all that stuff, but to see that type of production from a 1-2 punch, it's just been really fun to watch because you know everybody's gunning for those two guys, and it they don't care. They're magicians at this point, getting around everything, and what they have to go against is probably the deepest uh, team that's out there, running five lines, and whereas most teams are running four in the Dallas Stars, and it really is a tale of two different styles, if you will. You know, everything funneling through the two guys for the Oilers, but with the Stars, it's somewhat spread out. It's even. You don't know where it's coming from, but you are seeing some of these younger kids really step into leading roles for this team through these playoffs. They hadn't been there, but they are definitely getting that experience now, and they are proving that they belong.
Oh, absolutely. And to go back on the Oilers, when you're saying, the 1-2 punch, they're gunning for them. Well, that really opened up a hole for Zach Hyman, who's leading the team with 11 goals. It really did open up such a big door for him. But the Oilers, one other point that I want to talk about is their selflessness. If you look at it, I'm going to read off their top four on points players here, but I'm going to read you off their assists. Drasati, 16 assists. McDavid, 19 assists. Bouchard, 15 assists. And Hopkins, 12 assists. No other teams that are remaining come close to even touching that. The Panthers only have one guy up at the top with double digits assists. Rangers only have one guy with double digits assists. Uh, Stars don't have anyone. So you're seeing a lot of passing, but that also could hurt you, some of the extra passing, but it's helped succeed them because they are assisted or counted points.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the Dallas Stars, you couldn't have said it perfect with how deep they are. And yes, I'm so glad you pointed out having the five line because that means you're going to have a lot more fresher legs because you are running more lines out there. And we already talked about that fresher legs, deeper the postseason run, and that's where it is very important. But Dallas has something special going on there. The way they, kind of dismantled the Avalanche towards the end of this series. Avalanche, they did try scratching and crawling back with the great team that they have, but the Stars were just too much to handle for them. And, Ed, you want to talk more about even their goalie situation there, too?
Well, in this point of the season, you've got to have your goalie standing on their heads no matter who they are. And when you think of Ottinger against the in the playoffs, I harken back to the night in which he stopped 52 shots and didn't give up a single one. That was just a magical thing. But you know it's there at this point. You know he can shut anybody out at any point. And the fact that his team plays great defense in front of him, that is just helping the cause. What as opposed to him being left all alone to just stop everything. And the rest of the team, they do have a high number of blocks themselves without having to just rely on Ottinger to do the whole thing. So that's a big part of it that I see going into this. And you had talked about the number of points that the top players on the Stars team has. I don't typically see a lot of defensemen leading teams in points. And that just goes to show to the balance of this team because sure, you don't see as many points, assists, goals in the top five of that roster, but you are seeing a nice even spread. And that was more to the point I was alluding to earlier is you don't know where it's coming. Is it coming from the point? Is it coming from the crease? Is it coming from the side? Is it coming from these sharp angles? Is it being down and dirty in front of the goalie? Those are, they can do it all. They're not relying on a single way to score, but they are able to do every way to score, and that is really a tough out for anybody that's going against them in this round, Edmonton.
Yeah, and although he is leading them in points, he's also leading them on with average time on ice, and it's not even close. I mean, 28 minutes
Yeah, they've
is
been
a
a little
little,
thin at that area.
yeah,
That's the one thing I'll say.
yeah, and so but I once again, I'll allude to the Nolan Ryan comment. Heiskanen
Mm-hmm.
would be perfectly fine with that time on ice right now, so don't be fooled by that. But nonetheless, it is going to be a great, I'll say, Final Four with the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference Finals upon us in hockey, as well as the NBA. And I'll say it again: anything could happen, but we are seeing some of the very best when it matters the most. And here they are, the final four teams in both the NBA and the NHL. But over the weekend, we saw we saw a first, and that was Xander Schauffele winning his first major over at the PGA Championship at Valhalla. And be honest, going into Sunday, I was skeptical if Schauffele was going to be able to hold this lead. I really was. I didn't know really who was standing out to me. I mean, we saw the amazing day Shane Lowry had on Saturday, and it made me think, is he going to bring this into Sunday? Because he's got all the momentum right now. And I just couldn't really tell. But nonetheless, Xander Schauffele did pull it out. It is his first major after he's won 12 tour victories. Runner up was Bryson DeChambeau, and he wanted it so bad. He wanted it for Liv, not for himself. He wanted it for Liv. Let's be honest. To be a Liv player to win the PGA Championship, it just would be the icing on the cake for the Liv Tour. Still can't watch him on CW Ed, right?
No, no, still hadn't seen it.
But Bryson DeChambeau, I was actually really impressed with his game because when we watched him last at the Masters, he stormed out really hot the first couple days, but he faded off. Where this was a Bryson who didn't fade it off, and it was actually some of his best game that I saw on the tour. Uh, I was really impressed with it, but I was more impressed with Xander Schauffele holding him off. And there were some crucial putts that Bryson did need to make at the end. Fortunately, he missed the one on 17 that he really needed, but he did make the one on 18. But I knew being tied going into the 18th hole, which was the easiest hole, uh, I knew Xander was going to get that. Even though that shot he had from the bunker, I was like, how's he going to set his feet? And the ball is higher than him. It's just, but gosh, that's when you know a lot about a guy when their backs against the wall, they had the most pressure on them, and to hit a shot like that with his second shot, he deserved it. He absolutely deserved this victory.
That was a winning time shot. That's after that you could see DeChambeau, who was waiting to see if there was going to be a playoff. He was still out there hitting balls in the practice arena. They had the big scoreboard for him to see, and he was just kind of waiting to see, keeping himself loose. When he saw that, it's like, okay, I'll do this, but I know that this is gonna be it. Because remember, it's that course ends on a par five, and it wasn't like it was a long par four. Like there were, I believe, four par fours that were over, uh, that were just about 500. Is
Mm-hmm.
that right?
Yeah.
Uh, so this the scoring average deemed that the 18 was the easiest hole, like you said, but it was tricky, and Schauffele almost fell into the trap, literally, by having that tee shot wind up on the rough going into the sand trap. He had to stand in there and really set his feet, keep his core stable, and let off a good go. And when he got to the green with that 6 foot putt uh, to win it all, you just knew it was done.
Yeah.
It's it was somewhat of a formality. If he had lipped that out, the everything that was negative about Xander Schauffele going into final rounds may have creeped up in his mind uh, during a playoff, but he just closed the door, got his one under, and actually set the scoring record uh, for the for that particular championship. So that was a huge day for him. And Bryson DeChambeau has garnered a lot of positive press in the golf world for the way he carried himself during this championship, not only on the course, but his enthusiasm and his connection to the fan base. It was actually very nice to see him not be considered the bad guy or the bad boy of golf, if you will. So I was happy for both of them. Uh, a couple other notes. Colin Morikawa, he was in that final group. He just he just could not get under par. It was a great round, even all the way through until the final hole. But when you are in that final grouping for the championship and not able to make any movement, that gets frustrating. That really kind of set the tone for him to not be able to basically get out of and get on pace with Xander and keep up with him.
Yeah, you need to be able to separate yourself, and he couldn't. His only birdie of the day came on 18, so you can't. And it was a beautiful day. Wasn't any excuses really. That was when you really needed to jump out, and that's why on Xander Schauffele, this was by no means any luck. I want to go over some of the key stats here on just strokes gained. He led with strokes gained off the tee, his approach to the green, and even his tee to green. This is a guy that led in several categories, so this wasn't luck. This was a guy who had his A game throughout. And yes, he shot a 62 on day one. And then, of course, Shane Lowry comes and shoots a 62 on day three, but he didn't one up him. he tied it.
Yeah.
But Xander Schauffele, when it mattered most, he separated himself from the pack. Bryson DeChambeau just was trying to play catch up, ultimately did tie it. But that par 5 18, where it was the easiest hole, you had to do more before then because you left it up to him on the easiest hole to get a birdie, and he did in fact do that. And I just thought it was picture perfect to me because there's nothing better than being the last golfer on the very last hole and the last shot of the day to win it. To me,
Yeah.
there's nothing better than that. It's one thing if you're a couple golfers ahead, but to be the very last guy out there, that's where it was just perfect to me. Hats off to him, and finally, you could finally say your first major, and congrats to Xander Schauffele and everyone else out there too.
Yeah, and it's such an advantage to be in that last pairing on the final day. The majority of majors won at this point are from that final pairing. So it really becomes a race to through the third round to see if you can get in that final pairing because you don't have anybody behind you pushing your time. One thing I did notice is with DeChambeau's group, which was the one ahead of him, he got done 3 holes ahead of where Xander and Colin Morikawa were standing.
Yeah.
So they those two guys could take their time, really plan out their shots, and not feel like they needed to be pushed by the pairing behind them, creating, trying to create space. And that's such an advantage in that situation. So hats off, and it just goes to show you if you hit the green at 83%, then there's a better chance that you're going to do well.
It's kind of crazy to think Bryson and being the pace. Bryce
Yeah,
said of the pace, how far he's come when it comes to that, how fast he played. But gosh, can you believe it? It's been 10 minutes or so, and we haven't even mentioned Scotty Scheffler's name. Well, I'm going to have to do it now. He did finish eight on the day. He didn't have the best third day, and that's why we didn't hear much about him or talk much about him going into the final day. But there was a lot looming around him, although that didn't really stop him on day one. I mean,
no,
but there's been some more news as far as his arrest with everything that's happening down there in Louisville. He has his arraignment has been moved to June 3rd. Uh, they have now said that there's no body cam footage, and now, if I saw correctly, the mayor is doing some more investigation on it. They are expected to have an announcement actually this Thursday, so pay attention on Thursday because there could be some big news coming. I don't exactly know what, but I know that uh, Scotty and them kind of have a case. So
oh yeah.
uh, it sounds like, I mean, there's always three sides to a story. I will say that. But when you look at Scotty Scheffler and his actions and all that he's done, he is by far not perfect because no one is. But it's hard to see a man like that do something like that. But, uh, you know, we'll see what justice, happens. But pay attention to that come Thursday. But do you think this was looming on him at all, Ed?
After the arrest happened on Friday, he just rode the momentum of the adrenaline of like what just happened and had a tremendous round. But Saturday, you saw it finally took its toll. That that front nine, really the first four holes, he bogeyed three of them and wound up with a three over for that round, which is significant because it is the only only round over par he has played all year. Let that sink in for a second because that is a special year of golf. And that is the reason why we all expected Scotty Scheffler to at least be in contention for the Grand Slam uh, in this calendar year, which had only been done, oh gosh, 100 years ago. No, more than 100 years ago. Yes, he'll get his Scotty Slam at some point. We all expect that. However, this was maybe the best chance that we had seen somebody coming in with number one accuracy off the tee, number one accuracy getting on the greens, and having the putter just be average or maybe even a little bit better than average after he switched to that mallet putter. We all expect more of Scotty, but there was just so much weighing on him that Saturday finally got to him, and even in falling out of contention, to still be in the top 10, that is way better than what I would anticipate pretty much any other golfer on tour to be able to offer on at a golf course like this, especially.
Yeah, Scotty will definitely have his Scotty Slam. It definitely sounds like a new menu item at Denny's as well.
Yes.
It's marketing genius right there. But these greens, I feel like these greens, a lot of people had trouble really picking up these greens. I mean, the weather did play a factor. When it is wet, you already know you have slower greens. But I saw Scotty with that struggling, pretty heavily. But yeah, 42 straight rounds above par or better for Scotty Scheffler. I mean, until he had that round on the second day. So that, or sorry, third day. My apologies. So he is always going to, be at the top because of those. He plays a very minor mistake rounds because that's just
Mhm.
what he's known for. And to see him, what he did on Saturday was very shocking. So, but it happens.
And his ability to control yardage and accuracy, it's it's just it's something that we don't see from the other shot makers that we see out there. You know, Spieth is great around the green. He's he's sometimes a little wonky off the tee. Uh, Justin Thomas, who actually beat Xander Schauffele um, in in which one of the main stats from inside of 100 yards. I believe Justin Thomas actually beat Schauffele in that, but we're not seeing him have that accuracy all the way through the course, the way that Scotty has been doing through this calendar year. So here we are. In a couple of weeks, we'll have the Memorial Tournament, and I'm really looking to see Scotty bounce back and be right back in contention uh, after he's gotten all this other stuff behind him.
Yeah, and Justin Thomas, I'm glad you brought up his name because this was a homecoming. First time he was ever able to actually play there in front of his home crowd. So I thought that was really cool seeing that. You were able to see the fans really behind him. It made me, excited that I live pretty close to there that I could go there until they started showing all the damn snakes around there. And I was like, nah, I'm not, nah, I don't do that. So, like, why are you guys showing this like it's normal? And those water moccasins? So I don't play with that. It's like if you're watching a Cowboys game, you watch all these rattlesnakes right there. Nope. They don't belong
Not for
there.
me.
Yeah, so but it was really nice seeing that with Justin Thomas. But yes, Scotty Scheffler, I will most likely will see him back to his A game, especially when some of this stuff comes behind him. But if you have not seen that video, I recommend you watch it. It's a viral video of him uh, hitting the shots, and he'll tell you pretty much the exact yardage it was. That's how much he could control, just like Ed said. Look it up. It's amazing. He's the number one golfer in the world for a reason. And all these golfers are incredible. So don't get me wrong there. But to actually see a guy know just based off of feel how far he's hitting these shots, and he's, either spot on or a yard or two off is incredible to me. So I highly recommend looking up that video. He has an amazing control and very well-rounded golf game. But this weekend, it was not his weekend. It was Xander Schauffele's weekend. I know if you are a golf fan, they're very similar type names, but Xander Schauffele was the rightful winner, and it was really nice seeing. So Xander Schauffele, I hope you're celebrating. I mean, I've already seen the videos of you and your caddy chugging from the cup, and good for you. That is the celebration I expect to see, and so I expect to see you win some more majors as well. This might have been your first, but it's not your last.
And I will say that he now can pass the torch of the best to not win a major.
Exactly. You don't ever want to be in that category. You look at the John Stocktons or the Karl Malones, the best to not win it in basketball, but they were so incredible. Xander Schauffele, though, he could finally say, it was not one, I finally have won it. So I can't wait to see him win some more. But that is about all we have today, folks. If you could hit that like and subscribe button, share these videos, we would greatly appreciate that. Go ahead and hit us up in the comment section, the chat section as well, on predictions on the Final Four matchups in both the NBA and the NHL playoffs. And what do you guys think? Scotty Scheffler, is he going to be freed? We gonna free Scotty? Is he going to be the charges are going to be dropped? I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are and predictions on that as well. But until next time, guys, we are rounding third and we are headed for home.